interesting aspect of this is the mutual reinforcement of it all. So you could stop there and just have a goofy game, but the mutual reinforcement of it all is quite strong. You are gaining through rolls, even successful ones, constant attrition on your stuff, basically. And you are also getting these various kind of successy things about coping with the thing that you're dealing with. A little light on content. I was wondering maybe if we had played it with a bit more content about exactly what we got out of the given conflict. But to get back to the point, with your points that you get, you can either refresh your trades, which is expensive, and you can do it, but most of us were usually, losing, not having at least one trait available in any given scene. So you're never really full up again, unless you were to throw all your points into that. But typically people didn't, because the way that you get new equipment is other people get it for you. They kind of look around and say, oh man, your rapier that's better than a broadsword is busted. Here, you're going to need this. And they make it up. So what you have is what they made up and buy for you out of their points. So there's a real quick mutualism that forms. You're looking at other people's sheets and sort of enjoying, filling them up with stuff off of the points you earned. And so, it's very simplistically effective in everybody being nice. And so quickly all sorts of things happened. There's the replacement of Longnose's Robe of Nothing, which saw quite a bit of use before it was destroyed, with substantial underwear. And it just felt wrong for him to be running around without his Robe of Nothing. Nobody wants to look at that. So substantial underwear seemed called for. I thought it was appropriately cruel for my rapier that's better than a broadsword, which was broken in the first scene, and he's landed with a broadsword for the rest of the game. There's variety of things of that kind. Now, the other biggie in the system is that Spotlight Banana, which, even though it's present in the title and it's sort of privileged on the sheet, and we actually told each other not to tell. You can look at everybody's. There's no secrets necessarily, but I think we sort of enjoyed not knowing each other's Spotlight Bananas, looking forward to just seeing them. And they don't show up for a while, which is fairly understandable. And they also really beef up an effective mechanic that you're using already. And I actually made a mistake. I exhausted out all of my resources in a particular situation, and they said, well, all right then, time to pull out the Spotlight Banana, not realizing that it acted more as an augment than a mechanic of its own, an isolated thing with its own quantities. So my Spotlight Banana really wasn't much, which is kind of funny because, first of all, I had knocked it out of the park in one scene with the unutterable despair as just closing the conflict, and it was in the ruins, and everybody was less. All right, I think we got what we needed out of Pain Song at that point, and so it's kind of okay that for the rest he was sort of a sideline character, and so my Spotlight Banana being that he commands the spirits of everyone he's betrayed or let down, and what happened, of course, is I said, my Spotlight Banana, okay, how does this work? I didn't know the mechanic, and I'm looking at the mechanic. I'm like, oh man, this isn't going to be worth anything. I get like a die. So I rolled it, and it bottoms out completely, and so my Spotlight Banana is worthless. And amusingly, through another player's suggestion, narrated as that with all this angst, Pain Song has only ever betrayed or let down one person. So, of course, the Spotlight Banana ain't much. So that actually ended up paying off quite well, in my opinion. That's pretty funny. So all sorts of things. The wit flew, and that would be, I think, trivial. I mean, enjoyable at the time, but of no interest for any of you watching. What made this whole thing work, though, was the incredibly simple mutualism of providing stuff for each other. I got all sorts of stuff. Well, particularly, slaying the great big scorpion in the desert or the ruins, can't remember which one, but slaying the great big scorpion there was quite arduous, and lost us a bunch of stuff, but we got a bunch of points. And it occurred to us, somebody, to start giving each other, to give another player equipment that was clearly looted from the carapace of the scorpion, and that caught on. So nearly everybody by the second half of play was sporting all this equipment that was all scorpion pieces, and some of it fairly amusing, but it was kind of cool. We were sort of this scorpion gang of adventurers there for a while. So that kind of thing had a lot of weight. Played for comedy, fine, but it had a lot of weight as mechanic. And I think that the inspiration points, for example, of 5th edition are fairly low grade as a mechanic. I don't think they're very fun. And I think the whole idea of you get a point and now you can spend it for a bonus, now you can spend it for some narration, I think it's pretty played out. It ultimately, historically, I look back on that precise mechanic and I say, you know what? That was always a patch rule. And it only ever was really exciting because the baseline rules weren't serving a purpose that they should have. So looking at that as some sort of strong mechanic in isolation, really when the rest of the game is pretty functional, then that simply becomes, frankly, a great big syrup poured over the system. And I don't find it really very good. So therefore, I mean, granted, any mechanic, theoretically, in the context of a bunch of other ones with reinforcing parts and ways in which it's applied, can be awesome. So simply writing off a mechanic ipso facto as wretched takes a lot to do that. This one hovers at that boundary for me. Whereas something like this, where you are basically just gaining points in a relatively straightforward way, they come off your dice of successes and stuff. And you also have these other dice which are raining disaster upon you regardless of success. It's also got a risk mechanic for that. So you're kind of choosing how much disaster you're choosing to, rain upon you for your heightened chances of success. So with those little risk assessments going on at an individual level, and then the various points that are emerging then being spent mutualistically, it's kind of nice. You're raining disaster on yourself, which is how you get your stuff broken and lost, and you are gaining points that you're spreading to others. And so your risk assessment isn't really threatening them, but your reward system is very much extended toward them, and it's quite clean in this regard. And I would actually be very interested in seeing that dynamic get ported in as the main system of improvement and change for a fairly straight up fantasy questy situation. Shouldn't be very hard to do. And those of you who've been kind of like playing 5th edition and going, and tweaking it, throwing out a piece, simplifying this or complicating that, might well look at Dragons and Banana for a couple of insights about the aesthetic of the game, which is to be in these quests with diverse and slightly emo characters who have common ground and, something they're doing together, which is very, very 5th edition. So if you take a look at that, I bet you benefit. Great time. Really fun people. Special mention to Delove, who really busted out these kooky narrations that almost just were like, oh, forget it. This has just gotten too ridiculous, but almost went there every time. And then upon a second look, you're like, okay, that actually works and isn't violating what we're doing. He had a real talent for that. All right. Thank you for listening.